Well, let's head to America now. And he's a regular on this show and a rising star in the Republican Party ranks. If Donald Trump takes back the White House, expect Elbridge Colby to feature prominently. He was the architect of America's national security strategy just a few years ago and believes the real threat to the USA lies with China, not Europe nor the Middle East. Give us a sense, Elbridge, of your take on the current state of the world at the moment. And of course, thanks so much for joining my show.
I don't think it's a ridiculous exaggeration to quote Winston Churchill here, and I'm always sheepish about doing so, but to call it a world crisis. I mean, I do think that the worst European war in 75 years that's going on and does not appear to be moving in a favorable direction. And then, of course, atrocities committed against the Jewish people that are the worst since the Holocaust, and the possibility of an expanding war in the Middle East. And in a sense, the biggest shoe has yet to drop, which is the potential for China to move in Asia. So I think we're in an exceptionally dangerous time. Don't take it from me. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin spent about an hour and a half, 2 hours, just, I believe, on their own at the Belt and Road Forum in Beijing recently. And I don't think they were talking about their golf game.
I suspect you're right, which is, well, absolutely terrifying. And then you throw in the bromance with North Korea and Iran as well. It's enough to put us all on edge, and that's probably not saying it seriously enough. Prior to the Hamas attack in Israel and the war that has ensued, you were very big on the US prioritising China almost exclusively. What do you think now?
Erin, I think the logic holds only all the more, because I think actually probably, if anything, what's happening is I think there very well could be a deliberate attempt by Putin, by Iran, by Kim Jong-un, and in the background, Xi Jinping himself, who has the most leverage to stretch and deplete the United States and to make us as vulnerable as possible in what absolutely remains the decisive theater. I mean, nothing has diminished about the threat from China and the avid preparations they're making for conflict. And now, of course, you have the United States President Biden in his second Oval Office address of his presidency on foreign policy and about the apparent world danger did not mention China. So it's a moment of, I think, real weakness and vulnerability on the part of the United States, an exceptionally dangerous situation where none of the fundamental factors driving the primacy of the challenge from China have changed.
Well, General Jack Keane said months ago that America would struggle to defend itself against China alone. How well equipped is your country, particularly given the fact that we rely on them heavily for our own protection here in Australia? How strong are they now if there is some kind of relationship that clearly exists between Russia, China, Iran, North Korea? What if China goes into Taiwan? Is America capable of doing anything?
I think we're definitely capable of doing something, but I think the situation is very dire and it's kind of on a knife's edge. I think a number of our allies, Japan, Taiwan, have kind of gone along with this, frankly, faddish, rhetoric out of Washington that in effect prioritizes the Ukraine and now is going to look again in the Middle East and says we can't afford to focus on Asia. Actually, the truth is the reverse, Erin. We can't afford not to focus on Asia because we don't have the resources.
What about AUKUS? Is it at risk essentially of capitulating or falling apart?
I think there's a real risk with AUKUS going forward. I mean, I think you're hearing that even from more establishment types, that, the submarine industrial base does not have the capacity to produce enough submarines. And submarines are the most important, along with our heavy bomber fleet, the most important asset in the U.S. arsenal. And of course, Australia is extremely close, but it's different when it's not a sovereign possession. So I think that's something that's going to be real. I think the plank 2 of AUKUS is very important and makes a ton of sense to try to scale co-production and technology sharing. We should be breaking down the barriers to working with close allies, especially like Australia. But I think AUKUS is going to face challenges.
Now, our Australian PM, Anthony Albanese, is heading to a meeting with Xi Jinping. Is it the right move, given how China has treated this country over the past 5 years? Some argue, and I would be one of them, that dialogue is always a good thing. What should his chief objective be on this trip, if you think he should be taking it at all?
Well, look, jaw is better than war. I'm with you. I think talking is fine. The key thing is to get to send the right message, and we don't want to sort of falling over each other effect among the U.S. and its allies like Australia to sort of get the best deal with China, because they'll pick us apart one by one. I think the main thing is we should not be under the delusion that anything has changed in China's approach to the world, and that they're seeking a very maximal version of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. And of course, countries like Australia will be treated even worse in a Chinese-dominated Asia. So I think, that's the thing is to be clear-eyed. I remember Prime Minister Abe was open to talking to the Chinese, and Prime Minister Abe was nobody's idea of a naive vis-a-vis China. So I think that's the sort of spirit, but I'm worried that that's not the approach the Biden administration is pursuing. I also think, in the meeting here in the summit between Prime Minister Albanese and the president, there's a lot of good feeling that's appropriate, but I think we need to inject into all of our relationships a sense of urgency and focus on the China challenge.
It's funny, isn't it? It's probably not the right word, but he hasn't been cryptic at all in any way, shape or form. I said on my show last week, when people tell you who they are, when they show you, believe them. Brilliant as always. Elbridge, thank you so much for your time.
Delighted, Erin.